So we have a new WWE Champion. Yes, it's what everyone is talking about last night on Monday Night Raw. I would say spoiler alert, but I think if you've already seen the thumbnail for this video, if you've seen social media today, or if you've even been on YouTube today, you would have seen that we have a new WWE Champion, as Drew McIntyre has captured the WWE title on Raw, and he will now face Roman Reigns Sunday night at Survivor Series as the WWE Champion from Raw faces off against the Universal Champion from SmackDown. So yes, the Scottish psychopath Drew McIntyre is the new WWE Champion, is the WWE Champion once again for the second time in his career. And the main event of Monday Night Raw saw McIntyre defeat Randy Orton to capture the WWE Championship. As I mentioned, this is McIntyre's second reign with the WWE Championship. Now, obviously, Randy Orton won the title back at Hell in a Cell on October 25th, defeating McIntyre in the main event in a Hell in a Cell match, but due to this championship change in the main event, McIntyre will now face WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns in a non-title champion versus champion main event at Sunday night's Survivor Series pay-per-view. Of course, Survivor Series airs Sunday night, November 22nd from the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida, inside the WWE Thunderdome. The show is also going to feature 30 years of The Undertaker as the Dead Man says his final farewell to the WWE. We will be doing a live watch-along for Survivor Series on Sunday, so be sure to subscribe, click that notification bell, and you'll be notified when we go live on the air for Sunday's watch-along. But let's go into the details of this WWE Championship change, this change for Sunday's pay-per-view, Randy Orton dropping the championship, Drew McIntyre becoming the WWE Champion once again. Now, in terms of the match, I'm not going to go too much into the match itself, the nuts and bolts of it, because I think what's really interesting about this and what really does need to be discussed is sort of the wider effect of this WWE Championship change. Now, in terms of the match itself, what I will say before I get into the wider issue here is that I thought it was a great match. I thought it was an enjoyable match. It certainly felt like a big main event, as it should really. I mean, the WWE Championship should always feel like a big match feel. We obviously don't always see the WWE Championship being defended on Monday Night Raw, so it certainly felt like a big main event. For me, it probably felt bigger than the matches that they had at SummerSlam, Clash of Champions, at Hell in a Cell. I think it felt bigger because it did feel like there was more on the line than just the WWE Championship. Also on the line was a match against Roman Reigns on Sunday and possibly main eventing Survivor Series, so it certainly did feel like a big main event. Now, obviously, if you watched the Raw preview that I did yesterday, if you've seen the posts on social media, I was massively wrong. I was massively wrong when it comes to this match. I personally felt, I really did think, and I said it in the video, so I can't hide from it. I really thought, I didn't think Drew McIntyre would win, but I certainly didn't think either way we were going to get a clean finish. I was really wrong, because not only did Drew McIntyre win, but we got a clean finish. I said I would be stunned if we had a clean finish, and that's exactly what we got. Now, for a second, WWE did tease that we were going to get the screwy no disqualification, count out, no contest finish that I thought we were going to get, but we didn't get it. Randy Orton attempted to get out of the championship match that way, but it was changed by Adam Pearce, who changed the match to a no disqualification, no count out match. So I was very surprised we got a clean finish, and I was very, very surprised Drew McIntyre won. I really didn't see it happening for a variety of reasons, and we'll get into all of them in this video. The major thing that I think was the big talking point coming out of Monday Night Raw after Drew McIntyre won the WWE Championship was, why did he lose the title in the first place? I think a lot of people were questioning that. Looking on social media, I think the biggest response and the biggest talking point was, why did he lose the title? Randy Orton won the championship at Hell in a Cell. That was 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? Something like that. And he drops the championship only a few weeks later. To me, it just screams that plans have changed. They must have changed. I cannot wrap my head around that they would have Randy Orton win the WWE Championship, defeat Drew McIntyre clean. Remember, he beat Drew McIntyre clean at Hell in a Cell. RKO in the middle of the ring, he won. I just can't fathom that they would have Randy Orton win that match, win the WWE Championship, and the plan always be for Drew McIntyre to win the WWE Championship back only a couple of weeks later on the go-home show to Survivor Series on Raw. I just don't think that's the case. I'm not criticising it. I've seen some takes on social media that say they used to do this in the Attitude Era all the time. They did it a couple of times in the Attitude Era. That is a bit of a myth. That, they used to do this all the time in the Attitude Era. They did it with Steve Austin back in King of the Ring 98. They did that then because they booked themselves into a corner. If Kane lost the match, he would set himself on fire. So they did that. Plus, they were in a Monday Night War. They did it with the SummerSlam with Mick Foley winning and Triple H winning. That's reportedly because Austin didn't want to do the job. There's a variety of things there, but this idea of it happened all the time in the Attitude Era, I don't know why people are complaining. That's a myth. That is a total myth. People like to look back on the Attitude Era with rose-tinted glasses on and try and make their own narratives when it comes to what did happen in the Attitude Era. So let's not forget that. I think let's dispel that myth. The biggest questioning point, as I mentioned, is why did he lose the title? He being Drew McIntyre. Why did he lose the WWE Championship at Hell in a Cell? And for me at the time, it was to set up the Edge versus Randy Orton feud, and we'll touch on this later on. But obviously, and I'm sure we will get reports coming out over the coming days and weeks after this WWE Championship change, but obviously to me plans have changed. Plans have to have changed. If the plan was always to get the WWE Championship on Randy Orton to eventually drop it back to Drew McIntyre, which, full transparency, I don't think is the case. I don't think that was the plan. Then why wouldn't you have Drew McIntyre drop the WWE Championship to Randy Orton at SummerSlam? Randy Orton heading into SummerSlam had all of this momentum. The amount of legends he'd kicked in the head, it was Edge, Christian, Ric Flair, Big Show, even Shawn Michaels. I don't know if he'd kicked Drew McIntyre in the head just yet. I don't think he had. But my point being, he had all this momentum. He had just beaten Edge at Backlash. He had beaten Big Show on Raw. As I mentioned, kicked all of the guys in the head. He was on a roll. He really was on a roll. That was the time to put the WWE Championship on Randy Orton. But instead, since he got into that WWE Championship picture against Drew McIntyre, all he's done is lose. All he's done is lose. You go back to all of these matches he's had with Drew McIntyre and with Keith Lee too. Randy Orton lost at SummerSlam, backslide, as a clean finish. He then lost at Clash of Champions. Yes, there was people interfering, but he lost to Drew McIntyre in the ambulance match. The following pay-per-view, a week after SummerSlam, he loses to Keith Lee clean in about 8 minutes. And then obviously, finally, he beat Drew McIntyre at Hell in a Cell. Even then, when he won the WWE Championship, people were questioning, why has he won the WWE Championship now when all he's done for the last couple of months is lose? Now his first championship defense, he loses again. I mean, Randy Orton, over the spring and the summer, has done nothing but lose. He really has. So it's very confusing, once again, why Randy Orton would lose this match. I mentioned in the preview last night, by all accounts, Randy Orton is facing Edge at WrestleMania. You have to keep him strong. I know Randy Orton is bulletproof, and maybe that's what WWE looked at when, well, Randy Orton can do the job, it doesn't hurt him. But if you're doing jobs at every pay-per-view and on every TV, it can't help. Even someone like Randy Orton is bulletproof to a certain point. Eventually, they do have to actually win matches. And it kind of looked to me like Randy Orton won the match at Hell in a Cell, became WWE Champion because the long-term goal was to have Randy Orton versus Edge at WrestleMania for the WWE Championship. Suddenly, the brain trust of Vince McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, and that creative team, supposed creative team, in WWE then looked at the docket and went, wait a minute, we've got Survivor Series next month, and Roman Reigns is the Universal Champion on SmackDown, and he's a heel, and we're not going to have Roman Reigns drop the Universal Championship anytime soon. Oh my gosh, we've got a heel versus heel match at Survivor Series. Oh no, what are we going to do? We've got to give the championship back to Drew McIntyre, and it's kind of like they've only just realised that over the last couple of weeks of, it's a heel versus heel match. Maybe the main event won't go the way we wanted to, and all of this stuff. And it's kind of like, okay, we'll put the title back on Drew McIntyre, and maybe we can revisit Randy Orton being WWE Champion. I don't know. This just speaks to the chaos, quite frankly, of the writing when it comes to Monday Night Raw over the last couple of months. We always hear these stories, right? Before Raw goes on the air, rewrites, the show's changed. The second and third hour, it's being written whilst the first hour is on the air. We hear this every single week. We saw it last week. Drew McIntyre was meant to be on A Moment of Bliss with Alexa Bliss. The segment never happened. It got cancelled. It just got pulled from the advertisement because of rewrites. And it kind of feels like this WWE Championship change once again. They've had this idea for Survivor Series. They've got this idea for WrestleMania when it comes to Edge and Randy Orton. And rewrites strike again. Vince McMahon suddenly has that light bulb go off in his head and go, actually, what are we doing? We've got to have Drew McIntyre be WWE Champion again, pal. That's kind of what it feels like. It was just very confusing, very odd. And again, I'm not complaining. I really liked Drew McIntyre as WWE Champion. I thought his first run, considering the circumstances, he did an absolutely fantastic job. And he really has grown and elevated into a true main event level talent over the last 12 months. He really has. You think about when he won the Royal Rumble, there were still some people going, oh, is Drew McIntyre ready? And all of this sort of stuff. You can't make any argument right now. Drew McIntyre is a main eventer. And Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns at Survivor Series, it is a bigger match than Roman Reigns versus Randy Orton. It is. It's a better match versus Randy Orton than Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns. It just is. It's bigger. It's better. Everyone saw that on SmackDown Friday. I think that's why coming into Raw last night, there was a little bit of discussion. Maybe Drew McIntyre might win because we had that segment between Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre. And I think a lot of people then said, wait a minute. I really want to see Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns, and I don't really want to see Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns now, because I think Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns is the bigger match. They're the two biggest stars, they're the two franchise players on the respective brands, so it is a bigger match, it's a better match. And maybe the segment on Friday did change things. Maybe they wrote that into the show. They had Drew McIntyre confronting Roman Reigns just to get people hyped up for the match on Monday Night Raw between McIntyre and Randy Orton, just to hopefully get some of that SmackDown audience to watch Raw because they want to pop a rating. And then maybe they saw the chemistry there. Maybe they saw the chemistry with Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns and said, you know what? Why are we doing Roman Reigns versus Randy Orton? Surely we should do Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns. It's a bigger match, and when are we going to be able to do it in the near future? Because these are the two guys that are the franchise players for their respective brands, and it doesn't look like they're going to switch brands anytime soon. So maybe Friday did change some things. Maybe the people backstage in WWE, maybe Vince McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, that creative team, whoever, maybe the discussion was maybe McIntyre should be champion. And when Randy Orton became the WWE champion at Hell in a Cell a couple of weeks ago, he became a 14-time champion. So I've seen some discussion of people saying, well, maybe Randy Orton just won the championship to pump up his numbers. Of course, John Cena is currently a 16-time former WWE champion, the most WWE championship reigns in history. Obviously, I know people say Ric Flair. Is he a 16-time world champion, or is he actually a million times more? That's up for discussion. Randy Orton is a 14-time champion. John Cena, 16-time world champion. I've seen people say maybe Randy Orton just won that match because officials thought, you know what, maybe we want to bump up his numbers, and eventually we want Randy Orton to get closer to John Cena. I think it was actually in an interview. I can't remember for the life of me how long ago this was, but it was an interview that Randy Orton did. And he basically said, I want to get to become a 16-time world champion. And I want to get to a scenario where it's John Cena versus Randy Orton, WrestleMania. We're both 16-time world champions. And for whatever reason, I don't know if the championship's vacant or something like that, basically the winner of the match becomes not only the WWE champion, but the winner also breaks Ric Flair's record. That could be a WrestleMania main event, and that would be massive. That would be huge. Think of the business that would do. Who's going to break the record? And throw in a retirement stipulation. I don't know. Make it like a huge WrestleMania main event. Maybe. I don't know if that's really the case, that Randy Orton won the WWE Championship at Hell in a Cell just to pump up his numbers. I struggle to believe that, because I don't think WWE has that much foresight, if I'm going to be brutally honest. I really don't think WWE has the foresight to think maybe in a couple of years we want to do Randy Orton versus John Cena, so we need to bump up those numbers. Why would you stop Drew McIntyre's first WWE Championship reign just to do that? You wouldn't. In reality, to me, it just says that WWE changed their mind. Vince McMahon changed his mind. They do it all the time. And that's why it just felt like such an odd time to change the title. It just, again, it didn't stun me, because I always felt like there was a possibility in my head that Randy Orton would drop the title because of SmackDown's segment on Friday. But I just thought that they had done that just to make you question what if. But it just felt like a really odd time, and it just screams to me that plans have changed. It was a really short title reign. That historically, in the modern era in WWE, they don't do short WWE Championship reigns, I guess, unless you're Randy Orton. Because his last WWE Championship reign back in 2017, when he defeated Bray Wyatt, He made one defense against Bray Wyatt at Extreme Rules, and then the following pay-per-view, he infamously lost it to Jinder Mahal. So I guess if you're Randy Orton, you're only doing these short WWE Championship reigns at the moment. So it means that we're going to get Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns Sunday. Again, it's the bigger match, it's the better match. I'm looking forward to it. Now that Drew McIntyre is WWE Champion once again, though, I look back on the last few weeks and I say, man, if they'd have just kept the title on McIntyre, you could have really built this thing. You saw the chemistry there on SmackDown Friday. They could have built this thing. They really could have. And you could have had it weeks and really built up to it, but they didn't. And then if you look at Randy Orton's perspective, he's just lost all the time. That's all he's doing at the moment. He's lost at SummerSlam, lost at Payback, lost at Clash of Champions, lost last night on Raw. The only match he won was at Hell in a Cell. So you do have to question, where does Randy Orton go from here? Where does he go from here? We know he's going to feud with Edge when Edge returns from injury, but the rumours about that was going to be a WWE Championship match at WrestleMania. That was the reason why Randy Orton became WWE Champion, was because we need to get the title on Randy, because we're going to have Edge versus Orton at WrestleMania, and it's going to be for the WWE Championship. We're trying to raise the stakes of that storyline. Edge versus Orton 3 is going to be for the title. There's rumours about it being an I Quit match, but now you have to question, maybe that plan has changed. Is it going to be at WrestleMania, or is it just going to be Edge versus Orton 3, no title, and at the Royal Rumble? I don't think, whilst I think the plans have changed, I don't think the plans have changed so much that we're not going to see Edge versus Orton 3. You have to. Edge was written out of storyline because of his triceps injury, but he was also kicked in the head by Randy Orton. And the following Raw, he actually cut a promo saying, I'm going to come back for Randy Orton stronger than ever. So we're going to get Edge versus Orton 3. It's just a case of, is it going to be for the WWE title now? Is it going to be at WrestleMania? Or is it even going to be earlier than that? Could we see Edge back before the end of the year? To me, plans have changed. I always said when it came to Randy Orton versus Edge, I don't think it needed the WWE Championship, and I still don't think that's the case. I've said it for a long, long time. It doesn't need the WWE Championship. Edge versus Orton sells itself. The storyline and the feud has always sold itself. These are two Hall of Fame guys, two WWE legends. I thought their match at Backlash was excellent. I did agree with people when they said their match at WrestleMania, the Last Man Standing match, was long. It was too long, but I thought it was good. I didn't think, and I still don't think it needs the WWE Championship, but for a long, long time, even going back as, even the spring. But to be honest, the moment that Edge went out of an injury, it was reported the plan is to have Edge versus Orton for the WWE Championship, and that has been the locked plan for a long time. What I do think is more than a coincidence is that WrestleVotes tweets yesterday that whilst Edge versus Orton is still the plan for WrestleMania, suddenly it has been discussed that The Fiend versus Edge could be happening at WrestleMania instead. Wouldn't you know it, the very same day, Randy Orton drops the WWE Championship. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of time to go between now and WrestleMania, but maybe, look, it wouldn't be the first time plans have changed. It wouldn't be the first time, and this is WWE. It certainly won't be the last time that plans have changed either. Now, I thought, given the way that they were setting things up on Raw, and given the TV that we'd seen on Raw over the last couple of weeks, I thought it's inevitable we're going to get The Fiend versus Randy Orton after Survivor Series for the WWE Championship. Are we still getting that now? I don't know. Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss were focused on The Miz last night and John Morrison, so are we still getting The Fiend versus Randy Orton? I think we still will. I think that's a storyline they want to visit. They've got history. They've actually have invested some TV time into it, so I think they still will visit it, but I assumed it wasn't just about the history, it was also about capturing the WWE Championship for Bray Wyatt. So this is why it feels so odd, because for weeks we've been hinted and teased on TV that Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt is coming soon, and yes, Randy Orton has all of these targets on his back when it comes to the WWE Championship, whether it is Bray Wyatt or Drew McIntyre or The Miz or whoever. It's kind of just been hinted that despite all of these targets, Randy Orton, he's the Viper, right? He'll slither out of it and be fine. And yes, Drew McIntyre was involved in that because he was the former champion, and you don't just drop him straight out of the WWE Championship picture. But he wasn't like the forefront of it, I would say. He was kind of one of three. He wasn't the featured person going after Randy Orton. It was also involving The Fiend, also involving The Miz. It didn't feel like we were going to get a championship change anytime soon. And then next thing you know, bang, suddenly he's the WWE champion again. So it does, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but it does feel like plans have changed. I'm just waiting for the report of Dave Meltzer's come out and said plans have changed or whoever, because they have changed. And I find it interesting that Survivor Series has done it again. WWE, for whatever reason, when it gets to this time of year and just before Survivor Series, they just rip the card apart and change it. Because they've changed the main event of Survivor Series once again. This is the third time in 4 years that they have switched the WWE Championship right before Survivor Series. It's the third time in 4 years. How crazy is that? First it was AJ Styles versus Jinder Mahal, 2017. Then it was AJ Styles versus Daniel Bryan, 2018. They didn't do it last year because they didn't have the champion versus champion thing with the male world championships. And they've done it again this year with Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. So for whatever reason, WWE, they plan Survivor Series, they have the world champions, and they see the main event between the two world champions, and then Vince McMahon, for whatever reason, is just horrified by it. Whether it's Brock Lesnar versus Jinder Mahal, or Brock Lesnar versus AJ Styles, or Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns, for whatever reason, he sees it and says, oh, we can't do that, we'll change it, change the WWE Championship. What is it with Survivor Series and WWE's inability to plan the main event? Because 3 out of the last 4 years, it's more than a coincidence at this point. It's just bad planning. It's bad planning. Every time it happens, they look at it and goes, oh, we can't do that. We've got to change the WWE Championship. Have a bit of foresight. Plan it. Don't go month to month. Actually go, we've got Survivor Series coming up in a couple of months. Do we want to do a title change before then? Because it just looks so reactionary. And I know they're trying to sell that anything can happen on TV, or when we get into Survivor Series season, you better pay attention because someone they might change the WWE Championship. I don't know. But every time, the same time with AJ Styles and Jinder Mahal, the same time with AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan, the same now with Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. They get 1 or 2 weeks away from Survivor Series and the main event, and they change it and they go in a complete other direction. Why? I don't know. Because they can't plan anything. For whatever reason, they can't plan anything. Their planning is so bad that they have to change the WWE Championship on television. They don't even save it for a pay-per-view or a WWE Network event. Now, what I will say is every time they've done this WWE Championship prior to Survivor Series, every time it's been the right call. I'm not questioning that in the slightest. It absolutely has been the right call. We got AJ Styles versus Brock Lesnar in 2017, which was a fantastic match. We got heel Daniel Bryan versus heel Brock Lesnar in 2018. Again, absolutely brilliant match. I actually preferred that match to the AJ Styles match. They're pretty close, but I agree there. And like I said earlier on, Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns, it's the bigger match. It's the better match. It's the match that more people are going to be interested in. And it's certainly the match that's harder to call when it comes to the finish. So every time they've done this switch, WWE has benefited because of it. It's not a case of they've done it and it's the wrong call. It's been the right call every single time. We've got better matches, bigger matches, more memorable matches. And certainly Sunday, it's the bigger match than we were going to see, I think. But every time, it's just blatantly obvious and transparent what WWE has done every time they've changed plans because they don't like what they see. So it does feel odd. It does feel very reactionary. And as far as who wins on Sunday, now it raises the discussion, okay, you've got Reigns, you've got Drew McIntyre, who's going to win that? That is a lot harder to call. It really is. Because if it was Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns, I'd have easily said, oh, Roman Reigns will win. Of course he would win. Because it doesn't matter if Randy Orton does the job and lose, because all he's done over the summer and spring has lost. So another loss to the franchise player on SmackDown, arguably the biggest star in the WWE right now. I mean, that wouldn't hurt Randy Orton at all. As I mentioned, he's bulletproof. But now things change. Now it's Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre. Who wins there? Because both guys don't do jobs. Both guys don't lose. Both guys are incredibly protected. Drew McIntyre has lost, twice? 3 times in a year? He's been pinned twice in a year. Roman Reigns hasn't lost since he returned. So what do they do there? Because both guys are very, very protected. Like I said going into Raw last night, I once again sense a screwy finish here. Now, I could see a scenario where Randy Orton now gets involved. After losing the WWE Championship, he could get involved Sunday and cost McIntyre the match. I could see that because I really can't see Roman Reigns losing. And I know last night I said I couldn't see Randy Orton losing, but in the same sense, I really, really can't see Roman Reigns doing the job on Sunday. So I would be stunned. I'd be stunned. But then again, obviously, I didn't see them switch to the title last night. So who knows at this point? Nevertheless, all the questioning about the decisions and why they did the title switch aside, I thought it was a great match. Just once again, it will go down in history as one of those last-minute odd changes that came out of the blue. Now, what's interesting about the Drew McIntyre becoming WWE Champion again is it looks like we're going to get a Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus feud on Raw coming very, very soon, because before the WWE Championship match on Raw last night, Drew McIntyre had yet again another backstage segment with Sheamus. We've seen a couple of these over the last few weeks on Raw and on WWE TV. Prior to his WWE Championship match, Sheamus gifted Drew McIntyre a kilt. He gave him a storage chest that had a kilt and a sword, and he said that these are, quote, "these are dear to you and belong with you," he told McIntyre during the segment. McIntyre made a grand entrance wearing the kilt, wearing the sword. You had the fire and the pyro coming up, and you could even say it maybe spurred him on to defeat Randy Orton for the WWE Championship. Now, Sheamus actually expanded on this quite a lot when it came to why he gave Drew McIntyre these gifts on Raw. He spoke on Raw Talk. He said, quote, "I gave him those gifts to help him get back to his roots. Sometimes you forget everything you've been through to get where you're at. That was just me reminding him of who he is, where he comes from, and maybe give him a little inspiration." He then followed this up with, "After Randy got to him at Hell in a Cell, maybe Drew had a little doubt in his mind. When he opened that chest and accepted that sword, everything came back to him. Everything he's been through before, it all came rushing back to his head. As his brother, I was proud to do that for him." Now also, during the segment on Raw when he gave him the chest, Sheamus said he learned a lot about Drew McIntyre's Scottish heritage from his late mother, Angela Galloway, who died after a lengthy bout with cancer back in 2012. Sheamus was also reportedly close to McIntyre's late mother. He expanded on this on Raw Talk. He said, quote, "I know his mum, Angela, is looking down from above with a big smile on her face. Drew is back where he belongs," end quote. So, inevitably, it's very, very obvious there. We are getting a Drew McIntyre-Sheamus feud for the WWE Championship after Survivor Series. Now, I mentioned in previous videos, I mentioned earlier on that I really did think we were going to get Randy Orton versus The Fiend at TLC for the WWE Championship. Now, obviously, we can still get that Randy Orton-Fiend feud. It looks like it's just going to be about the history of as being part of the Wyatt family and not the WWE Championship. So, it looks like going into December, going into January, instead we're getting Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus for the WWE Championship. I think if you look at those matches, I think Orton versus The Fiend is a bigger match, but in the same way that Edge versus Orton doesn't need the WWE Championship, I don't think Randy Orton versus The Fiend needs the WWE Championship. I think Randy Orton versus The Fiend sells itself, and I think Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. It's certainly a feud that a lot of people have been interested in. They are legitimate friends. When you play on a real-life issue, a real-life friendship, they have chemistry. They've worked a million times before over here in Europe, but they've never really had that feud on camera for the WWE Championship. I think it could be a lot of fun. I think it could be intense, and we haven't seen it before. It's an intense, personal, and new feud. We're always asking and begging for new stuff. We always want to see new stuff on WWE TV, so I'm not against it. It's not a WrestleMania feud. It's not going to be a WrestleMania match for the WWE Championship, but an intense, personal feud. They brought in McIntyre's late mother into it. I mean, Sheamus, when he does turn heel, because he is a heel, and eventually he will turn on Drew McIntyre, maybe Sheamus even gets involved on Sunday and costs him the match against Roman Reigns, and that's how they kick off this feud. Either way, we're getting Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus soon for the WWE Championship, and I'm not against it. If anything, I'm actually looking forward to seeing where they go with it. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Drew McIntyre becoming the new WWE Champion last night on Monday Night Raw? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys and chatting about WWE Survivor Series and all of that fun stuff in the comments section. So be sure to leave a comment there, and I'll be sure to get back to you. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. So please click that like button. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. As I mentioned, we will be going live for a watch-along for Survivor Series on Sunday, so be sure to subscribe, bottom right corner, click that notification bell. You'll be notified when we go live for any live watch-alongs that we do. You'll also be notified when we upload new daily videos to the channel. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.